Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the regular meeting of council. Our clerk will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. I'd ask for a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. And I see Councillor Gesselbrock is joining us electronically for the reading audience. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 4th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. And members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically, but everyone who can be here is with us tonight in person. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, we have none.
That's correct, Your Worship.
A motion for adoption of the agenda. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. With respect to the Mayor's report, I just have a few items tonight. And just a little reminder that the City offers a variety of free activities and events this summer through Parks, Recreation and Culture. Concerts in the park have been underway since May and will continue throughout the summer at various park locations and featuring a variety of local talent. For instance, this Tuesday, July 5th, 6 to 7 p.m. at Piper's Lagoon, Waterston Trio, their blues, pop and country. Wednesday, July the 6th, 6 to 7 at Departure Bay Kinhut, Sol Azul, which is soft Latin, and various others. I won't read them all, but they are available on the city website. The playground program is back again this summer. It is for children ages 5 to 12 and offers a variety of games, arts, crafts, and sports. The schedule running Monday to Friday generally, including events at the Harewood Centennial Park, Mansfield Park, Country Hills Park, and Groveland Park. Lifeguards at Westwood Lake will start on July the 1st, and they will be there daily from 11:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Until Monday, September 5th, including Canada Day, BC Day, and Labor Day statutory holidays. For those looking to keep cool, the city operates 4 water parks that are open daily from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Departure Bay Water Park, Deverell Square Park, Harewood Centennial Park, and Mansfield Park. The city is also offering a variety of registered summer day camps and programs this summer. Those programs are found in the online summer activity guide at www.nanaimo.ca. Pleased to confirm that at our June 20th meeting, Council endorsed the Community Watershed Restoration Grant Guidelines and Criteria, effectively supporting a new grant program for environmental restoration within the City of Nanaimo. Up to $20,000 in grant funding will be available annually to community organizations, environmental nonprofits, and individual residents that aim to carry out watershed restoration projects, focusing on urban, stream, and riparian restoration enhancement, natural environment protection, and/or climate change adaptation solutions. And I want to emphasize this is not designed necessarily, obviously, for the watershed of the city for its main water sources back in the hills. And finally, I just want to remind everyone who's coming downtown, I hope every evening if possible, but if you're coming down on Thursday nights, every Thursday from June the 23rd through to September 1st, we will have the Commercial Street Night Market from 5 to 9. And that's on Commercial Street from Terminal to Church and Chapel, Skinner Street from Bastion to Commercial, Wharf Street from Commercial to Adam Grant Horn Lane, and Museum Way from Commercial to Gordon. And the street will be closed. I've had the occasion to be down both nights for brief periods of time. It's wonderful. The atmosphere is great. You'll be supporting many local vendors and your city and enhancing the livability of the downtown. I have nothing further to report. We have no rise and report tonight, Ms. Gurry. We have no presentations. We have committee minutes simply for receipt. And I would then ask some council member to move a motion for adoption of the consent items. Are there any that anyone wishes removed first, though? Seeing none, moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. With respect to the consent items, all those in favour and any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. We have no delegations unrelated to agenda items. We do, however, have reports. Tonight, the first is Bylaw and Policy Renewal Project Update and Introduction of a Miscellaneous Bylaw Repeal Bylaw. Ms. Gurry, you're in to introduce it, and I think Ms. Robertson's going to have a little bit of a spiel for us tonight.
Yes, she is, Your Worship. Thank you. I will introduce Karen Robertson, the Deputy City Clerk, to introduce and provide you an update on the bylaw and policy renewal project, and as well to introduce a repeal bylaw that will repeal bylaws that are outdated, ineffective, or no longer valid, and to seek a motion from Council to abandon bylaws that are sitting at third reading but not proceeding to adoption. So again, this is a great effort by Ms. Robertson over the last couple of years to clean up our bylaws as part of the bylaw renewal and policy renewal and update project, and she is going to walk you through her work and provide you a presentation on that, as well as the repeal bylaw.
Ms. Robertson, good evening and welcome.
Good evening. I am very pleased to be here tonight to provide you with a status on the bylaw and policy renewal projects and to provide you with an overview of the Master Bylaw Registry, which was the most labor-intensive project, or the task associated with the bylaw project. And in a minute, I'll give you a little bit of a show and tell with it. But before I do, I did think it was worthwhile to give Council a recap on what has been achieved to date since commencing the project. So on October 19th, 2020, a report went to Council that outlined a proposed timeline and a set of deliverables related to Council's action item on having a comprehensive review undertaken of Council's policies and bylaws. And in that report, staff conveyed that the bylaw and policy projects would be conducted in two phases. And the first phase was going to be focused on the bylaws, the second in policies, but there was a bit of a shift, and we prioritized the policies. And on July 26th, staff brought forward 101 outdated council policies for repeal and identified 45 that needed to be updated. Now, since then, there were some that have been updated, and some of the major ones include a new public hearing process policy, a community amenity contribution policy, an animal responsibility promise to return policy, sustainable procurement policy, neighborhood association organizational criteria and supports policy, video surveillance of civic property, and council spending and amenities policy. During this time, staff also commenced work on the administrative policies, and on February 22nd, the CAO repealed several outdated administrative policies. So with that administrative portion of the council policy largely completed and amendments were underway with the various staff members, focus returned to the bylaw project. And in July 2021, staff provided an update to council noting that the bylaw scanning deliverable was completed ahead of schedule, which was nice, and that work had resumed on the registry. And in conjunction with this task, several bylaws associated with the project were updated or developed. And some of the more major bylaws that were done in 2021 and 2022 to date included modernized animal responsibility bylaw, political signage regulation bylaw, business license bylaw, checkout bag regulation bylaw, the elected officials oath of office bylaw, ethics commissioner established bylaw, and a public notice bylaw to provide for alternative means of publication. So as mentioned earlier, the most labor-intensive part of the project was development of the registry, and it was marked for completion in Q2 of this year, so I'm pleased that we achieved this on target. And before I introduce the bylaw, I thought it would be worth highlighting why development of this registry was such an important part of the project. Bylaws are formal records of council's decisions, so they must be kept indefinitely, even if repealed. And the corporate officer is legally responsible to ensure they are recorded, maintained, and kept safe. Without a comprehensive list of the city's bylaws and a tool to track their status, it makes it very difficult to find out what is in effect. Having a tool to easily search them is helpful for staff, particularly new staff. As developing new bylaws, you can do a quick word search and it will reveal whether there's any bylaws in existence on a particular topic and determine what might need to be updated. It's also really helpful to see what laws were in effect at a certain point in time, and this is particularly true with zoning bylaws. We did select the Excel as a tracking tool is it's a format that's just not going to go out of style, and it's easy. It's most staff know how to navigate within an Excel spreadsheet. And so I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so Sheila's going to want me to scroll down on this, I think. So when we developed it, we basically started with bylaw number 1 and went right through. And so you can see that there's the bylaw year that it was established, the bylaw number, the name of the bylaw, when they got their first, second, and third readings, in some cases when they got the assent of the electors, the date it was adopted, in some cases the provincial approval, which bylaw it amended, which bylaw it was repealed by, amended by, and the repeal date, and also some comments, like if something was missing. So at the bottom of the screen, all the bylaws from 1875, those are all regulatory bylaws. And I'm just gonna give you just a snapshot here of how far this thing goes down. It's huge. The tab here, so for rezoning 4000, it's identified in red, and that means that it's been repealed. So anything noted in red has been repealed. Same with, say, OCP 3500. Bylaws in green are ones that are proposed to be repealed tonight. And there are some bylaws in blue, and those are the ones that are up for abandonment. It means that they had readings, but they didn't go forward through to adoption. And the ones that are in sort of a soft yellow color, if we can maybe come up with some of those are ones that have been previously abandoned. So in total, there was 6,161 bylaws that were recorded. 5,251 of them are regulatory bylaws, 644 zoning bylaw amendments, 215 OCP bylaw amendments, and 51 improvement district bylaws that were pre-amalgamation. So I do have to acknowledge Jessica Vanderhoof, who some of you know in our Legislative Services Department. She played a large role in inputting a lot of this and doing some of the research. So without her assistance, it wouldn't be before you as quickly as it's come. So once everything was recorded and scanned, staff was able to quickly analyze each bylaw and identify those that were still in effect but outdated or no longer valid. And there were a total of 54 regulatory bylaws and 48 amendment ones dating as far back as 1891. So in order to formally repeal them, we put them together in a miscellaneous bylaw repeal bylaw, which is before council this evening on page 153 of your agenda. And the rationale for repealing each of them is outlined on attachment 3, and the bylaws themselves are also attached, which has made a huge agenda tonight. So a couple of the older, more interesting bylaws that are still in effect that I came across that are still on the books. The first one I wanted to mention was the Public Morals Bylaw, and that was passed in 1890, where one could be fined between $5 and $50 for using grossly insulting language, selling of a lewd book, picture, or drawing, or found drunk while screaming and singing. And if fined and one didn't pay, the goods and chattels that you owned could be forfeited and sold. And if you didn't have the money, hard labor up to 6 months could be imposed. So bread sales were regulated in 1898, and one could not sell bread unless it was specifically in a 1.25 or a 2-pound loaf, and your scales were legally required to be in a conspicuous location. Fines against that bylaw were $50 at the time. We have a daylight savings bylaw in effect. It doesn't coincide quite with what we're following now. There's a bicycle regulation bylaw that was enacted in 1896 that stated that no person could ride a bike more than 8 miles per hour. A bell or whistle had to be attached where one was legally required to ring the bell at least 40 yards before approaching someone. And also lanterns are required to be attached to your bike. Fines were $25, and if not paid, goods, again, could be sold, only this time you could spend up to 2 months in jail. Pool rooms were regulated in 1963, and no youth under 16 is allowed in a pool room or allowed to play pool. Window blinds, curtains, and shutters were also expected to remain open so that there was an uninterrupted view of the interior of the pool room. Fines for that were up to $100. And one other bylaw that I thought was quite interesting was the liquor license regulation bylaw enacted in 1913, because it personally affects me. No female customers were allowed in the bars at all, period, and not even be permitted to come upon the bar. There was also no card playing, shaking of dice, lotteries or raffles, or gambling of any kind. And fines for violating this bylaw were $100, and defaulting in payment would result in up to 4 months in jail. So it was a really interesting and fun project to see those snapshots in time to see what those laws were on the books. 19 bylaws were also discovered that received 3 readings but never went forward, and a list of those and the rationale for banning them is outlined on attachment 2. And there were many other bylaws listed in the registry that are no longer in effect. Previous budget and tax rate bylaws, but they're not being brought forward for repeal because they have a finite period of time and then they just expire. They're called spent bylaws, and so they become obsolete and it's not necessary to formally bring them forward. Some of the older bylaws that do need to be repealed, though, that have had ministerial approval or sent to the electors cannot be repealed unless you actually get minister approval. So there are still some of those bylaws yet to come forward, but we would need minister approval first. And then there were a number related to older agreements and leases. And just reviewing those would be fairly time consuming and would take a fair amount of research time. So we just thought, now that we have the registry, as leases come forward, we can do a quick search and see if there's anything that needs to come out at the time. So with the foundational work complete, the next steps for staff will be to continue to bring forward bylaws and policies that need to be modernized or amended for efficiency. And the next major bylaw slotted for legislative services will be a rewrite of the delegation of authority bylaw, where all delegated authorities will be outlined in one comprehensive bylaw, and we're planning to bring that forward to council on September 19th. So unless council has any specific questions, staff are requesting the council's support for giving the miscellaneous bylaw repeal bylaw its first 3 readings and a motion to abandon the bylaws as outlined in the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robertson. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure if everyone's read all of these bylaws. I found them very interesting. The street traffic regulation bylaw of 19, I have it here as 1922 is particularly interesting. At a time when bicycles and motor vehicles were considered the same, and so not as they are now today. I do have an issue though with one of them bylaws being repealed today, and that is bylaw 3199, and that's the nuclear weapons prohibition bylaw. And staff, Ms. Robinson has said the possession and development testing of the thing, the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons came into force, making nuclear weapons unlawful. When I did my research on this, I found that while that treaty was adopted at the UN, all the countries that had nuclear weapons did not vote, and all of the NATO members except the Netherlands did not vote. Therefore, Canada is not a party to the treaty, which means it's not a treaty here in Canada. Therefore, the argument that we need to get rid of this because now they're unlawful doesn't hold. So this is a bylaw that I think still needs to be in place. And if I may take a moment, this conversation came up back in 2013, when we were replacing the signs that disappeared that announced that Nanaimo was a nuclear weapons-free zone. And one of the councilors at the time quoted us, I think they are still relevant. She was referring to signs. We live in a really insecure times right now and very violent times. For me, the signs are a reminder as you come and go from Nanaimo that we're a community that stands for peace, that we are aware of our need to push forward a peaceful agenda locally and worldwide, thinking globally and acting locally, which we've adopted in our donut economy. That is a quote from Diane Brennan, our latest Freedom of the City, and I think that particular bylaw is still needed, and it's not, I don't think we should be repealing it tonight. So I'd like to see that one withdrawn. I don't have any problem with all the other ones, but I think it's important that we keep that bylaw, Your Worship.
I'm going to go to the speakers first, and then we'll figure out what we might be able to do to handle that. Councillor Turley.
Your Worship, I was going to make the motion, so I can hold off until we decide what to do with the other, if you wish, unless you want to make the motion.
Okay. Councillor Gesselbrock.
I just want to ditto what Councillor Bonner says. You know, I think it's a good statement to have. Looked like they reaffirmed in 2013, and there's a good article here. You can search really quickly if you write Sydney and Nanaimo nuclear weapon prohibition. But there's some nice quotes from Diane Brennan. And yeah, I think for whatever it's worth, it's a good statement to keep on the books. So I'd support pulling that out of the bylaw repeals here. Thanks.
Thank you. I was going to suggest, Councillor Bonner, if you make, as opposed to the acting mayor, Councillor Turley, if you wish to make the motion that we repeal bylaw miscellaneous bylaws, blah, 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 number, pass first reading with the exception of, would that be appropriate wording?
I think, Your Worship, the better way to do it would be to make a motion to remove that bylaw out first and then give the bylaw 3 readings.
I would like to make a motion to remove bylaw 3199 from the bylaws to be repealed.
And seconded by Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion on this? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I suppose I'll support the amendment, mainly because I have great respect for former Councillor Brennan. However, I recall the debate when this was passed in the first place, and quite frankly, it's something which is well beyond our jurisdiction and is basically meaningless. So I'll support the amendment, but without any great enthusiasm.
Councillor Armstrong.
I was just going to say, actually, that the Government of Canada is committed to the 1970 Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, so it does exist.
Thank you. And my research looking at the...
Councillor Bonner.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Am I on? In my research and looking at the UN's, they have a map of the world. Canada is not one of the parties to the treaty, so
Yeah, to the UN treaty, but it is party to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT. It's a separate one,
yeah.
so it does exist.
Councillor Gesselbrock, did you want to say something?
Yeah, you know, I think just regardless of whether there is an international treaty signed, I think we should keep it on just in case, you know. And I'm always punches above its weight, so just in case. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers, all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? I don't see any. Then we'll go to Councillor Turley, and for the motion as it stands now.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just as a preliminary to making the motion, I just want to say the one that I found interesting was the 1963, which prohibited youth, and I can't forget what the age was, from going to a pool hall. Thank God I waited until 1965 when I was 17. I may not be here today. Okay, down to serious business. So I would move that the miscellaneous bylaw repeal bylaw 2022 number 7352, a bylaw to repeal outdated bylaws, pass first reading.
And seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Councillor Turley.
I move that miscellaneous bylaws repeal bylaw 2022 number 7352 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Turley.
I move that miscellaneous bylaws repeal bylaw 2022 number 7352 pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. And Councillor Turley, all you have to do is move motion number 4 without having to read it all out. So.
Okay, I move that council abandon the following bylaws as listed.
And we have a seconder in Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Robertson.
Thank you.
Your Worship,
Interesting
just
report, and much appreciate your comments. Ms. Gurry?
yes, I just wanted to make one comment. The last time we reported to you on this, Councillor Bonner had a question for me that I didn't have the answer to that time, but I have discussed it with Ms. Robertson, and Jessica Vanderhoof got me the answer. But he had asked how many bylaws were actually in this registry that were in effect. And the number is 3,556 are active bylaws on that registry. And the total on the registry at the time of this report, and it had just been completed at this time, was 6,136. So that's the total, and I just wanted to update that number.
Councillor Bonner, one more?
Just a question to staff, if I may. When we passed the animal control bylaw, one of these bylaws should have been repealed. And I guess for whatever reason it was missed. I guess the question to me is, as we go forward and pass bylaws, are we going to have a way of checking to make sure which ones have to be repealed? I know we say in the bylaw it repeals anything before it, but some bylaws may only be partial affected.
I mean, absolutely. This is what the whole point of the registry was, because when you followed the bouncing ball backwards, nobody knew that that bylaw existed. You literally had to start from one and start moving and compiling and see where, you know, I call it the root of the weed. Every time you think you've gotten it complete, there's something else that rears itself. But this tool will now give all staff members the ability to do those word searches or check with Ledge Services, and we can very, very easily identify if there's anything that's outstanding that needs to be repealed. So
Okay, thank you.
hopefully this tidies it up.
Very good, thank you. Thank you again. The next item is council and committee meetings during campaign period. Ms. Gurry, over to you.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just trying to work the electronic agenda. As it was so large this evening, I'm trying to do it electronically. So the purpose of this report is to provide council with options during the campaign period, which runs September 17th, 2022 to October 15th, 2022, to postpone the live streaming, recording, and having the videos available on the website for your council and committee meetings. Of note that should have been mentioned in the report that's not included is the public hearing that is in September. So that public hearing will be strictly a public hearing and not a council meeting. There'll be no council items, and it will still be live streamed in order to allow for the telephone calls that are happening, and we are accommodating members of the public able to phone in for the public hearings. So this recommendation is before you. It has historically been brought before council during this time, pre-election, in order to recommend or inform council previously this year, this election period. It's a recommendation that you suspend live streaming, broadcasting, and publishing during this campaign period. And it's an order that for council meetings to remain council meetings and council business. And not to suggest this of any of you, but some council members that are going to be running again could use this opportunity as a campaign pulpit, and or people that are running that aren't members of council could use it as an opportunity to campaign. And it's to provide that fairness and in order to keep these meetings as council meetings. The recordings will be available as soon as right after Election Day, so there will be nothing missed, and communication will still happen for anything of importance. There will be communications after the council meetings, any follow-up with the media, and of course, any other questions that citizens have. Minutes will still be available as well, as that is a requirement. So if there's any questions or anything I can elaborate on, please let me know.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I'm actually going to vote against this, as I did the last time it came before council, the previous one. I think you can still use it as a campaign. You still do it, just shows up in your minutes. I think that transparency is more important for me, so I never saw it happen last time, and we didn't ban it last time, so for me, I think it's fine just to keep doing them, and I was trying to find other communities that do this, and I couldn't find any, so for me, I'm not in favor of suspending it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, I was wondering, Is this a best practice? I see that in 2018, this recommendation did not go through, but it did in the previous elections. Are there any other municipalities, or is this a best practice?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Martman, historically, I believe there was CRTC televised issues with broadcasting during a campaign period that was in the Elections Act that no longer apply, but that practice continued. So before my time as the Chief Election Officer in 2011 and possibly even 2008, but 2011 for sure, 2014 for sure, there was an information report brought to council saying, not for the CRTC reasons, but just saying during campaign period, we will be following this practice, and it was fine. In 2018, the same information report was brought to council, but council of the day made a subsequent motion to not proceed.
Thank you.
Councillor Himmons, then Councillor Thorpe, and someone at some point should make the motion so we're actually speaking to something. But
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm with Councillor Armstrong on this one. I appreciated Ms. Gurry's explanation. However, the rationale given in the report is that we would do this to avoid any appearance of favoritism toward current elected officials and to allow for fair representation, excuse me, of other candidates running. And I think the ability for people to see and discuss our conversation is more important to me than perceived favoritism. So for transparency issues, I won't move the motion or support it if it's tabled. Thank you.
thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. To get it on the floor, I'll move the recommendation and then I'll speak to it if it's seconded.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Turley. Councillor Thorpe, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand Councillor Armstrong's points. However, for me, I think there is good reason for this, and it has been done in past. I think there is a danger of, well, I've seen it happen in past, grandstanding by incumbent councillors and, in fact, also would-be councillors coming to the podium as a delegation. And I think this just levels the playing field to the extent that we don't have to deal with that. So I think there is justification for it. I understand the concerns about openness and so on, but to me, I'm quite prepared to accept this recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock, and then back to Councillor Martman.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm kind of 6 in one, half a dozen the other on this one. I don't want to be seen as, not being transparent, and that's probably the bigger value for me in terms of voting. So I don't think I'll be supporting this. And, if we do end up being here another round, we'll know by experience whether it was a good or bad decision. But so I can't support this as it stands now. Thanks.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Just further to that then, because transparency is important to us, but I understood from Ms. Gurry is that these meetings will still be recorded, and after the election, anybody from the community would be able to see why or how we voted on something. So I'm kind of leaning towards a level playing field, but I'm 6 of one, half a dozen at the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm quite decided on this issue, and tonight is a very good example. We have, by my rough count, maybe 6, 7 members of the public here tonight. There is nothing to stop any member of the public or the media attending the meetings during this limited campaign period from September 17th to October 15th and or reporting on the contents and what transpires at these meetings. They are entirely public. The whole purpose of this is to ensure as much as is reasonably possible a level playing field. And I must say, and forgive me for pulling my rather lengthy history out of this, I'm rather conscious of the advantage of incumbency and what it means when others are challenging an incumbent. So anyone who wishes to get a seat on council, who goes up against a council that is still getting, with great respect, free TV time for the whole period of the campaign, faces an uphill battle that will be ameliorated by the implementation and passage of this motion. This is designed to ensure, as Councillor Thorpe has very eloquently pointed out, no opportunities for grandstanding in the audience, because I think we saw enough of that prior to the last election by members of the public. and it prevents council members from using this as a ready and secure platform that is only available to them and not available to other members of the public in the same way. So as much as it may offend the transparency in the sense of broadcasting for the limited election period September 17th to October 15th, it levels the playing field for those who wish to seek public office in our community. And for me, that is a positive good. This is a motion of limited effect. I think it works best for democracy. It gives the greatest opportunity to the greatest number, and surely that should be a good thing. So I will certainly be supporting the motion now that it's on the floor. And we have in order Councillors Turley, Hemmens, and Bonner. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Much has been discussed about perhaps being televised would be an advantage to an incumbent councillor. However, it could also be a disadvantage if they're supporting something that is not popular with the electorate. So I would support it not being live streamed to make it even. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Hemmens.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to respond to your point about the opportunity to be at this table and have the mic is not theirs, not people who are running for council, but our job is to lead. It goes right until election day. And I think it's our job, excuse me, to keep that process as open as possible while we're leading so people can come in and have a say. And I'm not saying we're wiping out a say by stopping our live streaming, but to avoid grandstanding is not a good enough reason for me to change our governance practices. If people grandstand, it's a campaign, that's how it goes, but I'm not comfortable shutting down our live stream, particularly at a time right now when we're really talking about really big things. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. When I came to do this meeting, I was saying, sure, why not? This sounds like a good idea. But having listened to Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Hemmens, I'm not sure anymore. So I don't think I'm going to vote for it because I value the expertise of the electorate and recognize grandstanding when they see it. And this is a pretty good council. I mean, not that I'm, we have disagreements and stuff like that, but it's not something we've ever done before either. I don't think it's necessary. And I think the need to have, again, the transparency of having these meetings put out and streamed to the public, I think is outweighs the possibility that one of us might grandstand. And further to your comments about the public grandstanding, I'm trying to go through my memory, and I think I'm the only one that ran for election that got up in front of the podium during the last election, and I don't remember grandstanding even then, but maybe it was, I don't know.
Councillor Armstrong.
I agree with the points of Councillor Hemmens, and I did want to add too, it doesn't level the playing field because the minutes will still go out. So it's written word instead of being able to be seen. And everybody had the opportunity to run for council, and they can still go back and look at what we did. So like, to me, it's unless you're going to blank out every single video, you're not leveling the playing field because people can still go back and see how you voted. They can still go back and watch videos. So what's the difference if it's 4 weeks later or not? So to me, it doesn't make sense unless you're going to blank them all out, because they can still go back and see. And I agree with Councillor Hemmens. We've got some big decisions coming up, and I think the public has a right to see them, unless we put all city business on hold for that time frame. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. And if we're speaking to grandstanding, and I'm not looking at anybody at this council, I think we're very well behaved, well governed. But as for the public, they get 5 minutes in. That's all they get. So if anybody wants to come forward and grandstand, I think what Councillor Bonner said is the public is aware and they would be able to see it. So thank you.
So I'm just going to read the motion so that everyone understands what they're voting on. Motion that council suspend live streaming, broadcasting, and publishing of recorded council and committee meetings to the City of Nanaimo website and direct media requests and quotes for news releases to the CAO during the 2022 general election campaign period from September 17th through to October 15th, 2022. Now, both councillors Bonner and Martman have mentioned they couldn't possibly see the members of this council doing that. Well, I couldn't see the members of this council possibly committing murder, but I really don't think we're going to abandon the criminal code and say you can't murder people in this country. I use that as a dramatic example. The law is not designed for the individual members of a parliament or a legislature or a council at the time it's passed. The law is designed to apply across the board to render equality. I can tell you, this mayor, if he runs again, is not going to be sticking nice quotes on happy announcements during the campaign period that would give me the advantage or the appearance of being a wonderful mayor in this community. I will do that because I think it is the ethical thing to do. Now, I cannot speak for who may follow me in this chair at whatever point in time, but if this remains the policy of the city, then they will be able to use to full advantage taxpayer dollars essentially to stick their name in front of the public in a positive way to their political benefit. That is what we are talking about here. With great respect, the minor, if I can call it, imposition of perhaps a bit of closure or coverage to what would otherwise benefit members of the public who wish to hear council meetings, which they are still entitled to attend during this period of time, it is more than outweighed by the proposition that the law should apply across the board, that we should not be able to take advantage of our incumbency as members of council. So with respect, whichever way this goes, I'm going to do the right thing during the campaign because I believe it's the right thing to do. But the next mayor may not. And other members of council may choose not to behave in the civilized and appropriate and adult manner that this council has behaved in the last 3.5 years. But I will leave it up to this council to make its decision. I know where I stand on this issue. I obviously feel very strongly about it. It is a recommended ethical and appropriate policy, and I hope that members of council will vote for it. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I love it when you feel strongly about things. 2 questions to Ms. Gurry. Does this decision come before every council? So to the mayor's point about another council could use this to an advantage, would this come before council in 2026 for another decision?
In 2024, yes. Yes.
Thank you, I can't count.
Oh,
No, that's
no, you're right. 2026. I'm sorry. I'm rushing things.
Great.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, it would. I would bring it before if it's me and or my successor would bring it before you for certain.
Thank you. So that makes me feel much better about that. My second question, there is a component in here that I think is worth keeping, and that's regarding media requests and quotes. So if this is going to fail, should we pull the pieces apart so that that piece remains in, or do we allow the mayor to make that ethical decision?
I would suggest an amendment be made to remove that section and have that seconded. So have an amendment made to proceed with that portion. Should the mayor wish that, it could be seconded and then that passed, and then you could vote on the main motion as amended, which would then just be the suspension of the live streaming, broadcasting, and publishing.
Thank you. Has the motion been made and seconded? Okay, then I'm not going to push for an amendment, particularly given your conversation earlier. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock, unless someone else speaks, you have the last word.
Yeah, thanks. Just a question to staff. Just from the mayor's word, this isn't there's confusion. Like, this is not a policy that we have for council. It's not a council policy or a city policy to have a blackout of the recorded meetings during the election period, is it?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Gesselbrock, no, it used to be a requirement because of CRTC, like broadcasting issues through the Elections Act that don't apply anymore. However, it was a practice that was in place, and it used to just be an information report that staff would bring to you saying this is how things are. However, the last council overruled that and made their own motions to proceed with the live streaming and broadcasting. Mm-hmm. So they moved away from that practice, which is why this election cycle, I decided to bring the recommendation to council to choose. So normally in the past, it had just been an information report saying this is what's happening, but this election cycle, I came with a recommendation because of how it proceeded and went in 2018.
Right, so it's not a set policy, it's sort of a historical practice. And again, yeah, I was saying, I'm fine with either way. When I sit back and think about it, I can't see a huge advantage for the council having the broadcast and live streaming. You know, the 2018, the council and mayor decided not to do it, and you know, I don't think it was to advantage of the councils that ran again for re-election. So I think that we're pretty safe if we don't follow it, and I think just for arguments of transparency to not go with this. Thank you.
Thanks,
And
Councillor
Your Worship-
Councillor Ms. Gurry, before I go to Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, just to Councillor Armstrong's earlier point, and I believe I did research this back in 2018. I believe in 2018, the City of Vancouver did do it. I know that the Regional District of Nanaimo just did a motion similar to this a couple months ago during the campaign period. And in 2018, I didn't bring it forward until September, so many municipalities might be coming a little bit later on and closer to the campaign period.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Sorry, Your Worship, not to prolong this, but to me, this is something which has been considered best practice, which has been traditionally done for a good reason. And it's very interesting to me that it was the last council that chose to overrule that. And some of their other decisions, I think some people might have found suspect as well, but I won't go there. To me, this does make sense. I don't see it as infringing on openness and transparency. I see it as leveling the playing field. It's very similar in my mind to the run-up to, as Your Worship would know, something like a provincial or federal election where the incumbent candidate is not allowed to identify himself as the sitting representative. This takes away a little bit of our live airtime, as is fair, because other people don't have that advantage. Other possible candidates don't have that same opportunity. So again, to me, I think it is a small thing that does level the playing field. We're all equal going into the election. We don't get our faces on TV during the last couple of weeks of the election period. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Seeing no other speakers, all those in favor of the motion? Councillors Martman, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Turley, and those opposed? Councillors Armstrong, Gesselbrock, and Hemmens and Bonner. The motion fails. So we have no policy going into this campaign. Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 7336.02. Ms. Robertson, or Ms. Ulip.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. So Ms. Robertson is here and Ms. Fulla is online should you have any questions, but the purpose is to amend the fees and charges bylaw to add fees and charges for the finance department. So it's just a basic amendment to the fees and charges bylaw. So any questions, and Ms. Robertson or Ms. Fulla are available.
All right, I think everyone's had a chance to read the material. I'm not seeing any questions. Councillor Turley, please.
There we are. I move that Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 7336.02, a bylaw to add fees and charges for the Finance Department, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Turley.
I move that Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 7336.02, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Turley.
I move that Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 7336.02, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next is the Midtown Gateway and Water Supply Funding. Mr. Stewart. Mr. Sims.
Thanks, Your Worship. If I could ask that page 432 of the attachments or the agenda be brought up, please. That's just a good overview of the project. So, Your Worship, this is really another incident of volatile construction market and economic uncertainty. There's really two projects that we're talking about here. The main focus is the Midtown Gateway project, which was formerly known as the Boxwood Connector, and that is all of the roadworks, et cetera, associated with the connector between, as you see here, to improve access to Bevan Park and to improve traffic flow and mobility around the Bowen and Northfield intersection. The one thing about this project is it really opens up quite a large opportunity for a gateway and a signature development that council is aware of already on the, let's call it the north side of Northfield, adjacent to the connector. So there's a developer that has taken possession of that property and is already been through rezoning and will be continuing to develop that. So the Midtown Gateway project, which is the roadworks, is required to support that development, as well as all of the other features, as far as traffic and mobility are required. So council is well aware of the Midtown water supply, and I apologize for any confusion in creating the naming around Midtown this and Midtown that, but the Midtown water supply is really the backbone of the city's water supply from College Heights all the way to service the north end, support growth and improve resiliency, and ensure that the hospital remains intact. As part of this project, they've been folded together. Staff released a negotiated RFP, which is a novel form of tendering. So we bring in a contractor early in the process, and we work for cost savings and sort of optimize the design. So that's occurring on both of the projects, the Midtown Gateway project and the Midtown Water Supply project. The upshot is that the portion of water supply associated with the Midtown Gateway project came in significantly over budget. In the last several weeks, we've seen a dramatic increase in pricing for pipe. The good news well, I don't know if I want to say good news, but the silver lining perhaps is that this provides certainty, cost certainty for the entirety of all of the water supply projects. So we'll have our pipe supply, international pipe supply secured, we'll have our contractor secured, and I'll put the little asterisks in the caveat, barring any other crazy unforeseen things like, I don't know, a pandemic or an oil shortage or something, but I'm saying that with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but also crossing my fingers behind my back. So approving the staff recommendation will enable the city to award this project and lock in that certainty. And this is, this is, as I say, the silver lining on that. I think the majority of this cost is funded from water reserves and DCC reserves, which is an important note. It does not impact taxes. It affects our water supply capital plan to the degree that we need to extend it or lengthen it out a little bit, but it's a relatively minor impact, notwithstanding the dollar value. As Mr. Stewart indicated last week in his presentation on the current state of the market, this was one of the projects that we looked at to deal with the uncertainty. We split the Gateway project, the roadworks project, into two. So this is part one of that two-part project, and it's really about ground improvements and getting the underground done. And that enables the completion of this water supply portion. So part one is required for the water supply. There's been significant investment. Council's made significant investment in this area already, not only purchasing the land, which was a brownfield site, and reclaiming the lake that was lost due to construction, mining, and all kinds of debris that was put in. There is if you scroll up, please, a couple of pages, there's a good overview of the wetland that's been created as part of this project that indicate, sort of in advance of that. The second part of this project, this was only done 2 years ago, and it's already starting to regenerate and attract wildlife and so on. So this is a big plus, considering that this was a brownfield site. The second part of this project is budgeted for in next year, in 2023. We're not sort of going out to the market until we're a little more confident, and that will be part of the discussions that we have over the fall with council. So Mr. Stewart's here on the specific Gateway project. Mr. Squire's here as well on the water supply, so we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Councillor Turley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to, through you to Mr. Sims, a point of clarification. I thought I heard you say the majority would be funded through reserves and no impact on taxes. So that, of course, begs the question, where's the rest of it coming from?
Thank you, Worship. In the recommendation, it indicates the storm sewer section by 72,000. That's from drainage DCCs, and the balance is from reserves. So there's no impact on taxes whatsoever.
Okay, so the word majority was incorrect. Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Your Worship, I'm happy to support. In fact, I'll move the recommendations.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong.
If I may speak and ask a question, I'm curious. This is a $4 million overage, or not overage, but you know, I'm hearing that it's not impacting taxes, which is great, but what projects are we now worried about down the line? Or are we?
I may ask Mr. Squire to speak to this. This is largely on the water supply, and he's been very carefully going through his long-range capital plan to ensure that we're doing the right projects in the right order.
Okay.
So, but I'll ask him.
I don't expect clear answers, obviously. You know, we don't know what's going on with the market, but it's a lot of money, and I'm just curious if we're worried about the project itself, or are we worried about subsequent projects? Are we worried at all?
Yes, through your worship. This is certainly one of the first phase in the Midtown region. There's other phases coming up that will support more development in the north end. We had a really clear look at that last budget review and deferred some of the other non-priority projects outside of that, but we're certainly looking at our core infrastructure. And one of the major reviews of the water supply strategy was looking at we had a consultant look at all of our projects and piece them together, and certainly looking at our capital plan was one of the focused review of that study. And this one, first and foremost, is certainly needed. As you know, it's the volatility in all these in the last, certainly this was an accelerated project. It was landed in our laps. Normally we have the luxury of 5 years to plan and budget for something like this, but due to the current risk, this is priority number one, the first phase of this project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? The motion's been made. All those in favor? And any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is rezoning application number RA 478-2980 Island Highway North. Mr. Lindsay, good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening. Good evening, Council. We're here this evening to seek Council's direction with respect to a site-specific rezoning application, as you mentioned, at 2980 Island Highway North. And as outlined in the report, this is a site-specific rezoning for a cannabis retail store. Your Worship, what's somewhat interesting about this application, this is actually, I believe, the first application we've had for a relocation since 2018 when we brought these regulations in. So in this case, the proponents are proposing to rezone from the property at 1599 Dufferin, and that's a property that Council supported rezoning for back in 2020. So the rezoning criteria that were established in 2018 are outlined in the report, and staff are of the opinion that the applicants have met those criteria and are recommending first and second reading. I would note, Your Worship, that if council proceeds with first and second tonight, it would be scheduled to go to your public hearing later this month, July 21st. So happy to take any questions on that.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. Of the 20 some odd motions that we've made for rezoning, roughly how many have actually proceeded?
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Turley asked a good question. So there's been 23 applications, actual rezoning applications that have come forward to council since 2018. 19 of those have been approved or adopted. We have 2 that are active. So we have this application, and then later this evening you have a bylaw on for adoption. So those 2 are active. We had 1 that's currently on hold by the applicants and 1 that was denied. So of those are the 23 rezoning applications. I think more interestingly, as of today, we checked, and there's actually 13 operating in the community at this point that have actually gone through the entire process and have received their business license. So 13 at this moment in time.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions for Mr. Lindsay, Councillor Turley.
Here we are, we're on. I move that zoning amendment bylaw 2022 number 4500.201 to rezone 2980 Island Highway North to allow cannabis retail store as a site-specific use in the city commercial zone center CC3 zone, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Turley.
I move that zoning amendment bylaw 2022 number 4500.201 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Turley.
I move that council direct staff to secure the amenity contribution prior to adoption of the bylaw, should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Mr. Lindsay, thank you on that one. And we're on to your next one, Building Safer Communities Fund. Mr. Lindsay, you're going to have Ms. Bopal Singh speak to this, I gather?
I'll pause just long enough to allow her to arrive here. Thank you, Your Worship. We just want to give you an update and seek your direction with respect to an opportunity that's recently come to the city for a grant opportunity. And I'll let Ms. Bopal Singh run through the report and explain that in a little more detail to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have, through the federal government, an exciting opportunity where Nanaimo has been pre-selected to receive approximately $1.8 million towards reducing gun and gang violence. And the report you have before you is to ask for council's support of a staff recommendation that we put in a submission to acquire these funds. And the funds go over a 4-year period. And due to our work with the funder, we are taking the approach that we use the first year of funding, which is from now until March 31st, to, you'll see the funding breakdown in the table before you, to actually do a plan for how we will work to implement the majority of the funds over the next 3 years. And you'll see in the report the different variety of projects that can be used for the funding. So the interesting thing about this is that the funding is directed specifically to municipalities, not to law enforcement agencies. However, we have, of course, a great partnership with the RCMP and other entities that we know are interested in working with this and looking at this as a preventative and resilience building opportunity. And so the proposal is should council support us going ahead in making a submission to receive these funds, that we would work in partnership with the RCMP, Nanaimo First Nation, nonprofits, and others to come up with a range of activities and an approach for managing the funds over the following 3 years. So with that, I'll pause and see if you have any specific questions about what the funding can be used for or how we would go about managing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors Armstrong and Martman, please.
Thank you. I think this is way too much personally. I think if you partner with the RCMP, you will find that all of these are already done. There is probably at least 100 different plans that I'm aware of from when I was in charge of community policing that address gun violence and gang activity. So I don't see any need to have a qualified consultant because they're all done. They're all available on the RCMP websites. There's all sorts of programs. The other thing I was going to say too is that we have a qualified consultant, and that's in our community policing coordinator who did this job. So why would we spend dollars when we already have a staff member that's very capable of doing this and has access to all the programs? Like I say, there's hundreds of them on the RCMP website and on different websites under the youth programs, under guns and violence. And my other point was too that I think you cannot forget about the for-profits. For-profits have a bigger influence on gang activity than non-profits. So I would like to see for-profits included in that as well as partnerships. Thank you.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, I'm just wondering, under the report, because I think looking at any type of grant program is usually a good thing, but I'm wondering about the impact on staff, because under the options, if we did not accept these funds, the advantages would be staff time would not be used towards overall grant management. So that makes me ask, do we have the staff to be able to do this grant management?
Okay. Through Your Worship to Councillor Martman, we would not have put this forward as recommendation if we didn't feel we had that capacity. And one of the pieces is this plan does also see hiring somebody to help oversee. So while we would be managing the funding, and this is money that is coming unsolicited to us, it does provide, and perhaps in response to Councillor Armstrong, an opportunity to use this for resilience-based activities. So it can be recreational programs, following through the work we do with the school district and others to support other forms of directing youth and those at risk and providing the resources to nonprofits and perhaps for-profits, as Councillor Armstrong suggests, to implement programs that we know engage youth and others who are at risk and prevent them from entering into the realm where they're pulled in through social media and other strong draws, and building on existing programs that we know work and trying them out in our community. So we do see this as complementary, and we have spoken with the RCMP about this, and we wouldn't be proceeding unless they had supported this. Thank you.
And Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. To you, to Ms. Bhupal Singh. So can the money use it refers to, of course, gun and gang violence, but there is gun weapons violence that occurs in our community that isn't necessarily related to gangs. So would this funding not be able to be used for that, or it can be expanded for use in that area?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Turley, absolutely yes. So while there is a tie to gun and gang violence, there's a separation that you pointed out that occurs where gun violence may occur independent of gang association. And so yes, those risk factors that are related to that on an individual basis as well as a collective, there's opportunity through this to address both. Thank you.
So if I could just make a comment, I think we'd be foolish to say no to this because we have a bit of an issue in the community with violence. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are gun related. So I'm total support. Thank you.
Councillor Turley, while you've got the mic, why don't you make the motion?
I could do that. That wasn't on my checklist.
You don't have to read it out. You're making the recommended motion.
Okay, I'd like to make the recommended motion. Thank you.
Seconded, Councillor Himmons. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? Not seeing any opposed. Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay, Ms. Bhupal Singh. The next is the appointment of Bylaw Enforcement Officer. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Worship. We're just looking for council support this evening in designating Mr. Grant Love as a bylaw enforcement officer. And again, this gives them the power under the bylaw to enforce your bylaws within the city of Nanaimo. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I doubt very much we're going to have any questions. It's moved Councillor Himmons, seconded Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. We're on to bylaws now. The first is Subdivision Control Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 3260.06. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Subdivision Control Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 3260.06, text amendments and drawing replacements to the Manual of Engineering Standards and Specifications be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 4500.145. Councillor Turley.
I move the Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 4500.145 to rezone 140 Terminal Avenue to allow cannabis retail store as a site-specific use in the Terminal Avenue DT4 zone be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. 13C, City Plan Bylaw 2022, number 6600. Councillor Turley.
I move that City Plan Bylaw 2022, number 6600, to serve as the official community plan, pass third reading.
And seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Discussion. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I'm sure it's not a surprise to council, I won't be voting in favor of this plan. I've had concerns about it from the start, that council was the steering committee, not the community. I can't find any place in any of the research I've done where council was a steering committee. It was always the community. That's one of my concerns. My other concern is the way some of the questions were drafted. What we heard at the public hearing the other night, and I know a lot of people didn't agree with it, but I agreed with some of the points, such as we should have asked the question, do you believe in the donut economy? Yes or no, that the public wasn't given that opportunity to answer that, and I think that was very important. Public safety has always been a big issue for me. It actually, in the survey that was done by the city, it was 2 points, it was higher than the environment, which has its own, so that's another concern for me, so we're not listening to the community as to what their priorities are. I do want to thank staff very much for all the work you did on this. This is not a reflection of you, it's my beliefs that I believe we should never have been the steering committee, and I said that from day one, so I will not be in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martman, Gesselbrock, and Turley in that order.
Thank you. I am in full support of this official community plan. I want to quote a little bit from, I'll give credit to Mr. Dave Whitty. Our future depends on us embracing and directing change in a way that realizes our collective vision. We have spent the last 2+ years working with our community, doing workshops with various organizations, not-for-profits, and the business community. We have had pop-up tents, we have had surveys, we have had mail-in surveys, we have had Reimagine Nanaimo, where I've heard from people they've been approached countless times to be able to give their input. The success of this process and this plan will require major investment, and it will require urban design and planning. This is the vision of what we want to see our city build on in the next 25 years, I think it is. Our 5 main goals: a green city, accessible, well-being and livable communities, reconciliation and being empowered, and a prosperous city. Community safety and security has been high on everybody's minds. That's evident in the survey. And so section C3.1 actually is titled Community Safety and Security. But we have to remember within this plan, we have incorporated 5 other plans that we used to have separate and sit on shelves, such as our transportation plan. And community safety and security, to me, is throughout this document, because to be an accessible and livable city, we must have safety and security. We talk about food security, we talk about how we're going to develop our city, where all these plans are actually interwoven and interdependent on each other. My personal preference is I would love to see our council give full support with a unanimous vote for this plan that everybody has worked so hard on. It's such a beautiful plan with pages that refer to the policies, that refer to the plan. It documents the fact that this is a vision and that the action plans and the goals will be developed according to this plan. So we will have targets and we will have goals, but that's the next step. So it focuses on what we wish to achieve as a city. It puts policies in place to ensure that changes through development are in alignment with the community's vision for Nanaimo's future. If anybody has the opportunity to go through this plan, and it will take you time, I think we've developed a wonderful, livable, green, economically prosperous, accessible, inclusive, and welcoming plan for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martman. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks, Your Worship. I fully support the city plan. You know, our last official community plan was out of date by 12 years, and we're supposed to update it every 10 years. And so we took on this project, and I think that it was quite an ambitious project, completed during a pretty disruptive pandemic. But despite that, there's 3 very fleshed out phases of engagement, which we saw a record level of participation by people that inputted, one with the goals and the overall vision of what we wanted the city to look like. Then it delved in deeper into specific policies, and we worked very extensively with all our committees, which are made up of representatives from the community, to put input on those policies and build out the plan. And then we went back for another full round of public engagement, which included statistically valid surveys, which looked at more specific elements of that plan. So this was a 2-year process, and the plan sought to bring together all aspects of our city business into one coherent plan to meet the challenges of the city. And I believe for the most part that it does achieve this, and everybody who worked on it should, I think, be very proud of this accomplishment. I think that this plan works to set a course for a thriving city that can rise above some pretty significant challenges that we're facing. One with the rapid growth of this town, rising unaffordability, homelessness, and climate change. At the end of the day, brass tacks, I think what this plan actually accomplished will be determined really how willing we're all to put into place the actions that are required around these goals, such as environmental sustainability, livability, safety, well-being, and economic possibilities. So for what it's worth, this plan, I think, is an important tool to achieve our goals, and I fully support it, and I'm keen to just move on and start getting the work done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gesselbrock. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. I want to preface my 2 questions that I have with a couple comments first, and my concerns are all around the urban containment boundaries as depicted on page 175, particularly the properties to the east of the Cable Bay Trail. And given the fact that that is, I won't say a stone's throw because you've got to be a pretty good thrower to reach, but a close proximity across the trail to where the Nanaimo Forest Products have just purchased the land to the west of the trail for industrial use. So I'm assuming that at some point in time in the future that property will be developed for industrial businesses. That means that the only place people can live is quite a drive, and certainly a long bicycle ride away, if we don't include the potential for residential in the property east of the Cable Bay Trail. So my questions are, and I'm hoping if I get what I think are the right answers, then I'll support it, but if not, I have to regretfully pass. My first question is, how onerous is it to change the urban containment boundary? And I guess I would ask that of Mr. Lindsay.
Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship, through Councillor Turley. And this is a good question, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify, because there's often confusion between the urban containment boundary that's in city plan versus the growth containment boundary that's in the regional growth management plan. So they sound similar, but very different processes for amendment. So to your question, under amending this bylaw is, as tonight, an amendment requires the majority of council to amend the OCP, just like it does for an adoption. So that could be either by motion of council or an application that comes forward. The process is the same, does not require the approval of external agencies, does not require the approval of the province. Unlike amendments to the regional growth strategy and our growth containment boundary, and then our growth containment boundary is the current city boundary. But if council wanted to amend that for any reason, that is a different process, and depending on the nature of the amendment, could require the approval of all of the members of the regional growth or the regional district. But that's not what an urban containment boundary requires. An urban containment is completely within the discretion of council, and it's a bylaw amendment like any other bylaw amendment.
So my follow-up question, because I did say I had two, is when was the last time an urban containment boundary within the city of Nanaimo was changed? And if there was one, how long was the process? And you can get back to me on that. But
I'm sorry, I'm struggling to. I'm sure there has been one. I can't think off the top of my head.
I didn't think there was one, but
there was a property I can think. Sounds like my mic's cutting out. Yeah, it sounds like there was a property in North Nanaimo that I can think of probably about 10 years ago that was brought into the city, and at that time, the OCP would have been adopted and it would have been brought inside the urban containment boundary. But I can't think of anything more recent than that. Certainly happy to follow up with you. But the process is as with any other amendment to the bylaw. It requires 3 readings and adoption, requires a public hearing, but the ultimate approval decision-making sits with the majority of council.
Ms. Gurry, did you wish to add something, or?
No, Mr. Lindsay was just looking at me about his mic, but I was able to hear him. I'm not sure. I don't think there's a problem. It might just be you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Thorpe, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I've given this a lot of thought, and it's an impressive document, which I took the time this past weekend to leaf through once again. And I first of all want to express my total respect to Ms. Bhopal Singh and staff for all their work in putting it together. So please don't take it personally, but I am not going to support it. I think Councillor Armstrong identified a number of the concerns that I share with her. I honestly do not think that this document was community-driven to the extent that it should have been. I find it very idealistic, which is fine to some extent, but this is not just imagining a perfect city 30 years in the future. This is meant to be our plan to move ahead. And to me, this as a plan is simply not realistic, and it's also very expensive, which I don't think has been taken into account. For me, it comes down to the fact that I think I've been consistent from day one. I do not support the premise that it's based on. And on page 1 of this plan, it says, it, quote, adopts the donut model as a framework for achieving its vision. I do not accept that framework. I don't think it's a valid or strong framework on which to base our entire city plan. We're told on page 15, and I'll quote again, that it focuses primarily on transformative social and ecological change, will support global efforts to respect our planet, support global social well-being, end quote. While those are great sentiments at a global level, But I think for the average Nanaimo citizen who's trying to keep things together in this time of great economic hardship and cost of living is going crazy, I don't think our citizens can relate to that framework. And I don't think I can relate to it either. I want to deal with local issues that are affecting our local citizens, things that we have jurisdiction over. Let's make responsible decisions, economically responsible, socially responsible, environmentally responsible. Let's do all of that through all of those lenses, but let's not take this one global lens and say it is the primary focus, because that affects everything that's in the document. So I'm sorry, I can't accept that. Yes, there was lots of community input to reimagine Nanaimo, but I expressed before at a previous meeting I had concerns about the methodology and the wording of some of the questions, and the very basis of the questions relating to the donut philosophy, that did not come from or get endorsed by our citizens. It was given to them, and it came from the majority of council, which I agree, the majority of council voted to accept it. I was in the minority on that, as I'll probably be on the minority here again tonight. But it didn't come from our citizens. So there are many things in this plan which I do like. The land use proposals, I don't have concerns with them on the whole. Neighborhood plans, parks and recreation, amenities, there's things that I can totally support, but there's other things that I am totally opposed to, and I won't go into great detail here, Your Worship, or I'll be accused of grandstanding. There, for me, is a lack of emphasis on economic development, GDP economics, which the donut philosophy does not recognize. I don't find this plan overly business-friendly or development-friendly. There's not enough focus for me on crime and public safety, which our citizens have identified as their top concerns. So, and transportation is an area which I have really serious concerns about, and I will not support some of the recommendations in the plan related to that. But again, those are details which I'll be happy to elaborate on at a future time if you wish. So I apologize that I am not able to support this plan, Ms. Bhopal Singh and staff, but those are my reasons, and I think I have to stand by my principles and say I just do not accept the framework that it's based on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Hemmons, and then Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be brief. The plan has my enthusiastic support. It's far from perfect, but it represents over 3,000 voices of Nanaimo residents and 2.5 years of work of this council. If this doesn't pass tonight, I think it's on us. At what point did we think it was okay to stop the process and say, I have a problem with what's going on here? And that's kind of what I'm hearing. We're now at the end, and if there were places where we should have paused, then we should have paused. And I think we're at the end, and it has my enthusiastic support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gesselbrook, and then Councillor Armstrong again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just trying to pull up the goals of the city. So I'm actually quite surprised just hearing Councillor Thorpe speak in broad generalities about national GDP and about global socialism, environmentalism, and I'm quite surprised because that's not what's in our city plan. There's goals around community safety. Let me read some of the goals. In a healthy Nanaimo, community well-being and livability, community safety and security, number 1, affordable housing, intergenerational living, food security, emergency management, recreation, culture, and wellness. Is there a larger global social agenda here? I don't think so. The next one, in the area of reconciliation, representation, and inclusion, truth and reconciliation, equity and inclusion, culture, political arts, public art projects and programs, community events, festivals, tournaments, and gatherings, parkland and park amenity management, waterfront use and protection. Let's look at the environment section. These wild global agendas. Greenhouse gas emissions reduction, urban tree canopy, natural areas and greenways, healthy watersheds, water, sewer, and stormwater services, solid waste management, brownfield sites, all within our city limits. Next, mobility.
goals within mobility, connected communities, integrated walk, roll, cycle, and transit network, recreational trails, safe mobility, complete streets. Finally, a whole section on economic resiliency for the business community, economic capital, human, social, and environmental capital, business development, innovation and technology, placemaking and investment attraction, tourism. So I'm actually a little bit frustrated and angry with what I'm hearing today, and I do not think it adequately reflects the hard work that went into this this official community plan for the whole community. And I do think that it's a lot of grandstanding that we're hearing right now, and I'm actually a little bit disappointed what's coming from some of the councillors. So I'm going to try to keep the emotion in check, but I think this is actually a great plan that took into account a lot of community input from the business community, from the environmental stewardship community, from the public arts community, from the sports and tourism community, from the inclusion diversity community, from all communities, and I'm proud of what's been accomplished here. So I fully support this, and I really suggest for councillors to reflect on their decisions tonight about this plan. In the actual fact, it really does all come down to the implementation part of this, and that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where the real decision making comes. At the moment, this is fluff, and so I looking forward to the real discussions that will be happening in a month and probably within the next council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gessebrock. Councillor Armstrong, and then Councillor Bonner.
I just wanted to say that from day one, I've been opposed to the way this was done, so it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. I've been very emphatic at all of my discussions. I was opposed to the donut economy, so that should not be a surprise to you as well. And I do not believe it, as Councillor Thorpe said, basing a plan on something I don't believe in and I don't believe is achievable. We've got a tourism thing, and if you look right from Kate Rayworth, right, the key to a more sustainable and successful destination should then be sought in other parameters other than tourism. And what are we doing? We have tourism, and that's a direct quote right from her. And that's what we're looking to base. So where do you get the money for all of this? So I'm sorry, you won't change my mind, and I do not feel guilty at all. I will not be reassessing my viewpoint because I feel very strongly that, and I heard very loud and clear from many, many community members that were very opposed to Reimagine Nanaimo. Many of the concerns I did forward to Ms. Bhopal Singh. She'll remember the emails that I sent forward. I also had meetings with our CAO as well as Ms. Gurry about my concerns that I heard from people from the university, from people in my community, from all over. So the other thing, my last point will be too, it's great that we had two committees that this council led, but we never had the other committees that would have been available, like arts and culture and public safety. So I'm sorry, I just don't believe this is inclusive of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner, and then Councillor Martman again. Then I'd like to say a few words at some point.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I am enthusiastically in support of this plan as well. I appreciate the emotions by members of council. Usually that's my job, so I want to thank them for that. I just wanted to say that to me this plan is, not only is it a high-level official community plan, but I look at it as probably the strategic plan that all councils should be looking at as they go forward. And I look forward to the action plan that we will be developing as soon as this hits the ground. So that's what I'm looking for, because it's in the action that we will be implementing this plan. So I'm quite looking forward to that. Thank you.
Councillor Martman.
As this is a public meeting, I just wanted to counter what Councillor Armstrong has said with her feedback from the community. Is I've also had feedback, as I'm sure we all get, and my feedback has all been incredibly positive. So, and I've heard from a lot of organizations and people on the street. So there are many in our community that actually support this plan. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
You thought you were going to get away, Your Worship. No, I have to respond to Councillor Martman. We obviously hear from different people, because I have yet to hear from anybody who is supportive. No, I'm not talking about the plan per se, but of the philosophy behind it. I've heard many different adjectives used to describe it. Most of them are not repeatable here in an open meeting, but the last business person I spoke to, who is a local small business owner, simply used the word idiotic. And that's not the plan, that's the philosophy. So I'm really sorry that Councillor Geselbrecht is upset that people don't agree with his viewpoint. I do not agree with his viewpoint. Yes, there's a lot of pages in this plan related to local issues, but we're asked to view those local issues through this particular global lens. And I quoted from the plan, Councillor Geselbrecht. I didn't make up that language. I didn't use the word socialist, although I could have, but I didn't. So, you know, I'm sorry. I've been opposed to it from the beginning. I can't accept it as a framework. And I think at the very least, this plan should be deferred, and I'm not going to make a motion, but it should be deferred for the incoming council to have a look at and review and see if they agree with it. The majority of this council presumably does. I don't. So, again, that's my position. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I will be voting in favor of the plan, and I'm going to start with Councillor Armstrong's remarks about being opposed to the way this process rolled out, that she felt it should have been community-driven. And I guess my immediate response is, if we had had a committee with more public on it to start and given it to a committee, with respect, I don't think the results would have been any different. I think you would have had a number of community members who would have said, look, here's the areas I'm interested in. I'm not going to get hung up on the term donut economics or things that are seen as flashpoints for some people's responses and thinking to this. They would be focusing on what the guts of this plan is all about, which is pretty practical, down-to-earth management of a city's affairs within the limited jurisdiction that we have. We don't set income tax. We don't appoint provincial court judges. We don't administer the criminal code. We don't do all kinds of things. But within our jurisdiction, we have the ability to say, and all we're saying is something that I heard a long time ago, and that was think globally and act locally. The planet tells us every day in every way with these extraordinary weather events that we have some serious issues. And what the city plan really says is, look, we have to pay attention to those. Am I going to support everything that may flow out of this plan when it gets before council to specifics? Absolutely not. Of course not. None of us are. We're all going to have our differences as the things come forward that confront us, may reflect the plan, may not reflect the plan, and we or another council or councillors or mayor will make those decisions. You know, there's been much talk arising out of the hearings in Washington and the recognition, just having celebrated the 4th of July. You know, the American Declaration of Independence speaks to the equality of all men being created equal with the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, when there were literally millions of slaves who were treated as property. Now, it was an idealistic statement, and some may have regarded it as absolutely silly, and the British certainly did. And lots of people did. But there's nothing wrong with an idealistic statement. For me, the whole concept of donut economics, and with great respect, I never liked the term, to be honest with you. I think everyone knows that. I think it's silly. It doesn't speak to people. I think it's hard to understand sometimes. All that donut economics is saying is, look, we live in a finite planet with finite resources that has serious ecological issues around the globe. We live in a planet where there is increasing disparities between rich and poor within nations and between countries and continents. And we're just saying in our own idealistic little way here in Nanaimo, we think we have to pay attention to those things. And what does that translate into? We're not going to take away your houses. We're not going to build houses for all the poor in the streets of Nanaimo. We don't have the jurisdiction of the taxes. But insofar as we can cooperate with the provincial government to build supportive housing and seniors housing, we're going to. Insofar as we can encourage construction in our community that respects and the needs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we're going to do it. That when it comes to transportation, we're going to encourage public transportation where possible, encourage the use of bicycles, encourage the use of electric bicycles, try and reduce the carbon footprints of all of us. There's nothing here that, with great respect, I only wish we had the authority to do the things that seem to have upset people. This is not part of some global conspiracy or some grand idealistic socialist, communist, Raworthian, whatever dream. It's just a basic recognition that we do what we can within the means that we have within the limited jurisdiction that municipal government does in the province of British Columbia. That's what we're doing. It reflects incredible input from an enormous number of people. And I appreciate Councillor Armstrong's remarks that she's heard from lots of people who don't support it. Well, I have to say, if they didn't support it, they've had 2 years to voice their opinions, and I trust they made their input, which is reflected in the comments that came from the public. My goodness, how long do we have to consult with the public in order to achieve a plan? 2 years, for heaven's sakes. 2 years. Pop-up tents, visits, newspaper advertisements, Facebook, all the kinds of ways you reach the modern public. People had a chance to give us their input, and they did. And staff has worked incredibly hard to try and incorporate all of that within the context of a document that is about our official community plan, our transportation plan, our parks and recreation plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is not a straitjacket. This is a call. God, I was reading Blake the other day, to build New Jerusalem in this green and pleasant land as best we can within the means that we can. So this is not the end of the world, and it's not the beginning of the new world in a perfect way, but it is a recognition by this city and the staff who've worked hard on it, putting into words what the community has told us, and that is that we kind of like to live in a community that was more equitable, that produced less pollution, that built around nodes and centers that enabled people to move to their places of employment and to goods and services in an easy way that impacted the least upon the planet. Let us not make this into something grander than it is. It is a good city plan. It incorporates a lot of things. It is, as I say, and I'm going to repeat myself, it is not a straitjacket. It is a statement of belief and hope. And you know what? 56 years, the Americans still haven't achieved equality of men and women in their own country, and they still rely on language that only refers to men. I just like to think that this is a step forward for this city. It's not perfect. There are things that I won't support when it gets down to nitty-gritty, where the rubber hits the road, where it may come to a particular subdivision or an extension of a road or priority of spending. But it is like the complexity of our relationships. We don't always get along, and sometimes we have to compromise, and sometimes we'll disagree. But we think at the end of the day, the relationship is worth it. This plan is worth it. And I think we should support it, and I hope council will support it. I hope I haven't inspired anyone else to speak now, because we can go on all night, and I appreciate the passion that's been reflected at this table. And of course, Councillor Turley, as the senior member of council, but not the longest serving member, I will give him the last word. Please, Councillor Turley, and then we'll go to a vote, please, I hope. Sorry?
Correct. So I have to admit I was sitting on the fence on this one, and one of the answer I got sort of swayed me to the yes side of the fence. But I wanted to make a couple of comments. And one is the problem with the whole process is that trying to amalgamate too many items and issues into a single document gives rise to the risk of lots of opposition, which I think we've seen. However, I do not want to vote against just because I have an issue with a couple of items in the plan. I'm hoping that over time, probably not me, but some others will be able to take those issues and make sure they are done the proper way. And the only other comment I would make is perfection will take forever, so I think we should get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All those in favor, Councillors Martman, Gesselbrock, Hemmens, Mayor Krogh, Councillors Bonner and Turley. Opposed, Councillor Thorpe and Armstrong. The motion carries. Councillor Turley, there's one more motion under C.
Yes. I move that City Plan Bylaw 2022, number 6600, be adopted.
There's a seconder. Councillor Hemmons, all those in favor? Those opposed? Councillors Armstrong and Thorpe, motion carries, thank you. The next is 13D, zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 2022, number 4500.199. Councillor Turley.
I move that zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 2022, number 4500.199, to include development permit area guidelines, exemptions, and related definitions, in addition to other amendments for consistency with the proposed official community plan, city plan, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Those opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
I move that development approval information bylaw 2022, number 7346, to specify development information requirements be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Turley.
I move that general election bylaw amendment bylaw 2022, number 7129.04, a bylaw to bring the mail ballot provisions in line with the new provincial legislation, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no notices of motion. No other business. And Ms. Snellgrove, do we have any questions on our sheet? None? Councillor Martman? If you put your name on the sheet, I'll let you have your question. Yes, that's what it's there for. You got to be quicker. Councillor Martman gets the motion for adjournment. Your name and address, please.
My name is Jeff Ansley. My address is 6135 QR Place.
Thank you.
Hello, Council and Mayor. I only just have a couple of questions about mail-in voting and the adoption of it. I just wanted to know, and maybe this, I haven't dug enough into this, is this just mailing right to someone's house, or is there a chain of custody in the mail-in? Is there ID identification? Is there signature verification? Maybe the city staff can answer those questions.
I'll let Ms. Gurry answer the technical parts of it, but mail-in ballots require you to certify who you are, your ballot's inside another envelope, you have to certify, et cetera, but go ahead, Ms. Gurry.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So we have always had mail ballot provisions in our election bylaw. This is updating to allow for a more broadened allotment, so more public can vote, not just those that are going to be absent or that are ill, which was currently in the bylaw. So this just expands it to allow anyone to do it. And as the mayor said, there is certification process. Also you have to apply, you have to fill out an application to get a mail ballot, and at that time we do check your identification, etc. And when it comes back, we certify. There's a check-in process.
Okay, it's not just mailed to people's houses. There's
exactly.
Okay, awesome, perfect.
No,
Thank you.
At all.
You don't get to write vote for turkey in an envelope and ship it in, no. Councillor Martman? Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor, motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate the attendance of everyone tonight and the vigorous debate.